Obenga, one of the world's greatest Egyptologists, protege of Sheikh Anta Diop. Obenga used to teach us that he would organize it this way, and we can all organize knowledge however we want. But he says, he would keep it real simple. He said you got knowledge by faith, knowledge by reason, knowledge by opinion. And he says, knowledge by faith, you believe it. You can't argue with people what they believe. I mean, however they came to it, you're going to argue with them. It's just basically an exercise in you trying to sharpen your beliefs or whatever. He said, knowledge by opinion, that too is difficult to argue, because if you want to change somebody's opinion, we have to all be open to the fact that you can change my opinion once we have agreed upon the dialogue. What do we talk? What do we establish as our definitions? Then we can, but if we have different definitions, then it's just opinion. You ain't never gonna, it's like saying, who's the greatest basketball player of all time? Michael Jordan. Well, you never saw Oscar Robertson. Okay, so we don't have a common framework then. Basically, we just wasting air and generating ad buys for ESPN or whoever. The third one, he says, knowledge by reason. We've agreed on the standard. We apply the standard, and then we agree that whatever we come out with, that will be the thing that we agree is the thing as it is. So if we say, Vodun is evil, okay, that's knowledge by reason? Well, that's my opinion. Okay, what's it based on? Well, I remember growing up, we used to see these movies, so my grandmother told me, okay, fine. I don't know your grandmother. I don't know what movie you saw. So now we just arguing. Well, what about you? I think it's evil. Why? Because in my church, okay, have you ever been to a doing ritual? Have you ever read anything or talked to anybody who practices? No, I don't need to, because they told me as a child, okay, that's knowledge by faith. I can't argue with you. But what we can research, and I'm thinking about, let me give you just one quick book. There's an excellent anthology called Existence in Black. Lewis Gordon, my buddy Lewis Gordon, who is a philosopher by training. It's an anthology. There's a chapter in there by Page Henry, who was a philosopher at the time. He was at Brown University. Page Henry writes an article where he talks about the idea that when Africans were being brought here, and if people don't want to get into the academic side, it's a very good novel by one of the great writers of our time. His name is Daniel Black. He wrote a book called The Coming. It's a small novel. He's on the faculty at Clark Atlanta. He's a teacher like us, Clark Atlanta University. I love that brother. Brilliant brother. And so he kind of gives a fictional account of enslavement, the Middle Passage, and all this work. And it's very brilliant because he kind of puts in a place where people who don't necessarily want to read academic stuff, you can like be in this boat and see how this is happening. Page Henry says, once you have Africans introduced into the Western Christian system, because we know Christianity came out of Africa, you have this sense.
Can you say that again?
Oh, yeah,
you're like, you following the white man's religion. I'm like, no, first Christians were in Ethiopia. The first Christian convert was an African. Christianity, if you want to say Middle East, that's Africa. Israel was Africa 2,000 years ago. All of Christianity came out of Africa. It's not a white man's religion. Yes, slavery definitely bastardized, and they had a slave Bible, and they definitely used the religion as a weapon, as a tool to keep black people in line. But it's not a white man religion, and it's not a European religion, and it's definitely not a slave religion. So thank you for saying.
No, that's very important. Like you said, what we now saw is Israel. There was no physical separation between there and Africa until the Suez Canal in the 19th century. And it take Jeremiah Wright start talking about that Reed Sea. He said, y'all talking about the Red Sea. That was a sea of reeds. I mean, in other words, it takes the theologians to get into the notion that the idea of parting the sea, that was a metaphor. But again, not as by faith. We don't get no argument, because John Henrik Clarke used to say, the minute you try to read the Bible as a history book, you're in trouble. He said, no, take it as a book of allegory, which is what the narratives of all really faith traditions are. The Yoruba, the Odu Ifa, I'm not a practitioner. I know a lot of people are. I know you do too. A lot of people who are practitioners, and they will tell you it is extremely complex. We talked about that one Saturday. So, but I'm saying that given that, yes, in fact, John Henrik Clarke would say all of those three Abrahamic traditions are African exports. Christianity, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, all come out of Africa. So, but by the time it comes back into Africa, after it's going through Europe and then kind of conform to the cultures of Europe, the various cultures, and becomes white, it is used as a tool of domination. And Page Henry, in the book Existence in Black, in his chapter, talks about the fact that when these Africans are brought to the Western Hemisphere, you've got to try to strip them of their culture. They don't succeed completely, but you've got to try to short circuit the language, short circuit the cultures. And the people in the boats who then come together are kept together in clusters because it's efficient. So everybody couldn't talk to everybody else, but clusters of people could. And in the Caribbean, it was a greater chance that you would have clusters of Yoruba or Kikongo, even though they were from different regions of where they were from, they still had enough of a common language and culture to begin to try to build something. So what you have in the diaspora in the Western Hemisphere are these amazing polyglot, multicultural African mixes that are then hidden or pressed down under or commingled with the cultures of Europe and the cultures of oppression. But here's where it comes in terms of this good and evil piece. Well, you can't talk about Europe or religion. We can talk about regions of Africa people come from, but these are labels. J.Y.O. Peel has a good book on that. It talks about the fact that it's really Christian missionaries that start labeling these African spiritual practices as religions because they need a name they can label. But Africans weren't calling them religions. This is just the rituals, the cultures we do. So, but when they get here, and they begin to mix everything up, what's keeping them together is resistance. This is what Danny is writing about. We got to resist them. Who are they? Whoever got a gun. And they look like somebody different than us. And so therefore, they begin to build cultures of resistance. Let's go back to the resistance question. And then here's the thing about good and evil that's really fascinating. The way Robert Farris Thompson writes about it, but more importantly, people like Wande Abimbola, so many others. I mean, half them cats in Brooklyn, by the way. I mean, all them guys, there used to be a Botanica as a bookstore over there in Brooklyn I used to go to. It's probably still there, where you get all the Yoruba literature, right? The stuff you can't find other places. You got to go to black bookstores. So this Everyone's Place in Baltimore, Sankofa, in Washington, D.C., the black bookstores. You ain't going to find that on Amazon. So at any rate, they say that in these various traditions that come out of Africa, the idea of a hell is not present. The idea of a heaven is not present in the way we think about it. The idea then, so what Paji Henry says is, this is what the Europeans introduced to these Africans. They introduced to them a concept of religion that said that there is a vengeful God and there are things you can do so that you will either be tortured forever or you will cease to exist. At which point they scare enough of these Africans, not the Africans who came over, but their children, their children's children, as they're separating them off, and they say, oh, what must I do to be saved? In other words, because they introduce a worldview that is really fundamentally oriented around punishment. If you think about it, many Christians, not everybody perhaps, but many Christians join up in Christianity because they don't want to go to hell. In other words, it's a negative worldview. This is foreign to many other African people. They're like, no, existence is existence. There's ethics. There's things you should and shouldn't do. There are punishments. But the idea that the creator is against the creation, where did y'all come up with this? And so what you see in Vodun, Santeria, Macumba, Candomblé, you see these rich mixes of African spiritual traditions that are grounding them in an optimistic worldview. These are the things wait, what do y'all call it? So the Yoruba are like, yeah, we got Olodumare, okay, we got Shango, we got Yemaya. The Kikongo come, we ain't got none of them names, man. I came from a little village where I got the dirt, I got my ancestors over here. They start mixing that stuff up. Next thing you know, you got Papa Legba, Aruzi, you got Vodun, which is so amazing. And then it's all, here come the white dude, here come the white dude. What y'all doing? Nothing. It's Mary and Saint Joseph and Peter and all them. Okay, keep going. Nah, they gone? All right. Then and so they can't even see. They hid all that stuff under Catholicism. One of the jokes the Haitians always say, it tickles me whenever I encounter somebody from Haiti. I ask them, I say, you know what? Is it true what they say in Haiti? That Haiti is 99% Catholic and 100% Vodun? And they say, yeah. True. But what the white priest and what the black people who have been scared away will tell them, y'all stay away from that. It's evil. It's evil. Why? Because it's so effective. Because once you have your own culture, you can resist. In fact, Vodun is the foundation of the Haitian Revolution. That's what all the scholars say. And this is where I'll end with this. The idea of good and evil, no. Go back to the Egyptians. We talked about that. Heru versus his uncle, Setek. In their mindset, we all have every emotion in us. So when they tell parables of fighting between good and evil, they're talking about the internal struggle, what the Muslims might call the jihad. So when they have Eshu, or we talked about that, last week we talked about the signifying monkey and the rabbit and Bugs Bunny. These are the dilemmas of character. Odu Ifa say the most important thing you're on earth to do is to work on your character. Now the Indians overhear that and say, oh, that sounds like us. Yeah, you're working on your character. The Buddhist is like, yeah, that's right. And then you move on. And if you don't get it right, you come back as a fly or a horse or something. But you keep going to progressive enlightenment. And then here come the Europeans like, nah, if you don't do it right, you're going to heaven or hell. Everybody looking at them like, boy, y'all got a real messed up worldview. Why everybody got to go to hell? You got a God that would burn up the thing she created. Wait a minute. It's a he or a she. I'm sorry, you Europeans, I always get confused. It's a he. God is a man. Oh yeah, man. You know what? Y'all leave them Europeans alone. And so their only thing is, no, what they believe is evil because it's effective. So no, it's not evil. And some people are going to say, I don't care what you say. And that I would assume those are people who are taking knowledge by faith. I'm not arguing with knowledge by faith because you can't argue, you can't win.
You can't win. All right, last